Well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. I invited my friend Paul to do this talk with me because well, I'll let him say it. He said he wanted to talk about our history.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thanks, Caitlin, for hosting and for putting this all together, and for everybody for coming. We're super excited to share this morning with you all. So yeah, we were just kind of trying to recollect exactly when it was that we met, and it was almost 15 years ago now. I was visiting from New York, and a mutual friend of ours put this event together where I was doing a reading of some new material, and Jeremy had an art show, so they put the two of us together, and we had a little mashup event, and we hit it off right away. And I wasn't really involved in the art world at the time, and it's so Jeremy and I, we didn't really have like much connection relative to art for the first few years that we knew each other.
Yeah, I think it was more just common interests like music and just mutual friends.
Yeah, and we did an interview together, and it's funny because I read back to that, and I had commented that you and I didn't really talk much about art when we first struck up a friendship.
And now we're doing this.
Yeah, and so it's been great to see the evolution of your art over all this time. And I was just thinking about, well, speaking of Monumental, it's I've been kind of like ruminating on that term, and it's interesting. You know, I'm a poet, so I think about the language stuff, and the word moment is in the word monumental, and so that got me thinking about monumental events that happen, and things that change life and change the world thereafter. And so I thought that could be a good like point of entry for us.
Yeah.
When we first met, your art was like really socially engaged, but in a very different way.
Yeah, a little bit more like contemporary concerns in a sense, but not even concerns, more just like friends having a good time and kind of forgetting about like the negative things that are happening, just like living life. And that was when I was younger, so I was kind of in that place, so it made sense to do that type of work.
Mm-hmm.
But when you mentioned monumental moments, I think 2015, a lot of like the killing of unarmed Black people was like highlighted and spotlighted, and it affected me like really, really intensely. So that caused like a pretty significant shift in like my focus and work. Like I was doing stuff like I wasn't necessarily just painting like friends at that point, but a lot of that just went by the wayside, like completely. Like I wanted to make sure that the work I was doing was socially charged, more socially charged, like more relevant to actual concerns that people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some of the paintings from early on were a lot of people like partying and laughing, and it was all like really, really buoyant and light, and joyful and light, like you say. And even in the color palettes that you were working with, and so yeah, that shift occurred, and it was all like the work became so socially conscious in a different way, and also your MO, your point of approaching the work was still based in curiosity and somehow like in joy. And so can you speak about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wanted to be socially aware, but I didn't want to lose the positivity, because I think it's really important to hang on to that in the work and in life in general, because I mean, things can beat you up. You don't necessarily need the lessons that are learned or taught to also kind of beat you down, So, so me and Paul met up a couple nights ago to kind of go over this a little bit, and we were talking about, we were talking about like keeping the positivity in work and an entryway, basically, like having like the work not be so intense that it drives people away. Like it needs to be attractive to a point. So the colors and the buoyancy and the light still exist in the work. But if you get closer and actually maybe ask me or think about the work, there's an intensity to it that comes out. the longer you spend with it, or the more visits you pay to the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we were talking about how I liked what you said. You said, I start like this. This is cool.
Oh, yeah. Basically, we were talking about like curiosity in work, and also just the process of making a piece of work, or playing with different elements in work. And a lot of the times with my paintings, like there's this social element that I have, but at the end of the day, I want the piece to be cool. Like I want it to look cool and like attract people. So yeah, my first thought is like, when I have an idea for a painting, I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is a cool idea. So I get into it at that point, and then some of the research that I might do, or ideas that come from my sketchbook, or stuff that's been floating around my mind, enter after that. Like right. I try to connect the this is cool with those curiosities, or connect that this is cool with like a moment that makes sense with the process that I'm using, or the cool elements that I'm putting into the pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I think it's like super effective as far as like the content. When you start, I think, like speaking just about creativity, I think when you do anything, if you start with curiosity and with imagination, and you stick with that, and then bring in things that are like the other kind of like conceptual concerns, then I just think the combination is like super powerful.
Yeah, like
when you're doing that.
Yeah, we talk like a genuine curiosity, like and that genuine curiosity comes from like kind of ruminating on things. And there's the paintings that I've been doing recently are based around a thing called Shirley Cards, and we talked about it. Like I found out about these Shirley Cards like 10 years ago or something like that. And if you guys don't know, Shirley Cards were Kodak developed them in the 40s, and they were basically these I don't have any here, but these it's like a sheet of paper basically with an image of a woman, and like the color bar, or CMYK, maybe like a gradient, black and gray gradient, and like a single figure. And back then it was just a white woman. And when I saw those, I was like, again, this is cool. Like I like the way they look, like graphically. But the more I thought about them, the more I was like, it's just a white woman. Like the calibration of this film is catered towards one complexion and doesn't take into account like the gradations of skin tone. So over time, I was like, it'd be cool to do a series of paintings about that. So for the last like 3 or 4 years, I've been working with that, and that's kind of where I've been focused with my work right now. But yeah, so the rumination of ideas and concepts and history plays a big part in my work, and yeah.
So throughout, like speaking of the monumental moments, there were all those killings, and your work started to chime into that, and it seemed like you were responding just naturally to the way that you felt about what was happening, and also bringing in that curiosity and the passion that is completely evident in your work. Then with the Shirley Cards and bringing history into the work out of the natural way that you do research, and you're just interested in people's lives and in history. This bringing in the Shirley Cards and trying to subvert, trying to bring in the truth of what was happening in the past. I think that's another way of like doing activism in your work.
Yeah, like not passive activism, but like how would you say it? It's not beating the streets and like marching.
Creative activism.
Creative activism, yeah, I could say. Maybe a more I'm hesitant to say it, but like a more engaged activism, like over the course of time activism versus like just getting out there.
Well, I don't think there's a bad way to put it when you're doing, what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's just that you can't
do the thing.
I mean, yeah, but it's just interesting to talk about it too. It's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Especially for me.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing, like making the art and like creating a conversation that isn't necessarily directly about the thing is an entryway to talk about it. So yeah, a lot of the times with the work that I do, there's it's an entryway to conversation versus a direct conversation, like explaining everything. Like
this is how it is.
Yeah, this is how it is. I want it to be like, oh, that happened, and then like you dig into that and find out that this happened, and just like takes you down like kind of a rabbit hole of curiosity.
So it's almost symbiotic. Like your curiosity then generates curiosity.
Yeah. Totally.
I think you have a sketch that in your sketchbook that might have a relation to the gradation aspect, or at least the
Shirley Cards stuff.
Yeah.
I have some early sketches that I did that I did way before I started doing the paintings.
And they were related to the other exhibition that kind of dealt in the Shirley Cards to
Presence of Color.
Presence of Color.
So I did an exhibition in 2009, which was the first one that kind of dove into that. I don't know if I can, but this is like kind of an early sketch.
It's great to see your notebook too.
Yeah, my sketchbook here that just has all my ideas for paintings. Like I don't know, I don't have anything to show like work. I mean, it's all on my website, but a lot of these sketches end up in the pieces, concepts and ideas for things. But
so cool.
So I don't know if this goes along necessarily with the talk, but just to show some of the ideas, how they kind of manifest and generate.
Yeah. So yeah, the Shirley Cards, the paintings that are kind of based off of those that Jeremy's talking about. He's got an exhibition right now at One River in Lake Oswego that I got to go and see. It's incredible to see the range of all the different types of responses that you have to those cards, and the way that all the different paintings have such a remarkable difference and variation in the hues and in like the treatment. So yeah, the work is up until April 23rd. So it's One River in Lake Oswego. Yeah, it's
another thing about the Shirley Cards. We were saying the images that they used in them were of like kind of a nondescript woman. So in doing these paintings for the Shirley Cards, I wanted to use kind of the opposite of that. Like I started doing some research and finding images of Black women specifically that were the opposite of unassuming. Like I wanted like powerful looking women, women that were full of joy. So I started researching these magazines called, like I used Ebony and Jet in some of the early ones, but I started looking up some other lesser known publications. So this is a magazine called Sepia that I located. So this woman, Denise Nicholas, ended up in some of the paintings. Yeah, a lot of my ideas and concepts come from history. There's another one. So it's just this really beautiful publication that I found, and a lot of my source material comes from these type of images from history. I like to call up history in my paintings a lot and try to relate past events to present times in a way to, in a sense, kind of span the concepts and span the ideas of the pieces. Because we were talking about kind of maybe thinking about transitioning my work and calling less history and trying to be a little bit more contemporary with the work, that I struggle with it sometimes, like the idea of using these old images and like from before I was born and like why I'm doing this. But we talked about it, and it you made me feel better about it. I'm trying to think what we said exactly.
Well, you had said that it's a challenge to not just show what you've been curious about through history, and that there's a nostalgic aspect to it too. I think it's really difficult. I'm mostly a writer, and I think it's difficult to reflect the subjects of our day, often because they're a little bit sterile. I mean, so much of our world is digital and
sterile and kind of fleeting. One of the things, Paul's a writer, and he mentioned that he hasn't written anything that references like an iPhone.
That was just a silly example.
Yeah, silly example, but like it makes sense because next week there might be a new thing that people are focused on. So your work automatically is dated.
Yeah.
So quickly.
It's the poet Frank O'Hara wrote this poem called I think the poem's called "Having a Coke with You," and that's it turns out that that's stood the test of time because Coke is still like classic or whatever. And someone like a couple decades ago wrote a poem that was like having a vitamin water with you, and right away I'm like, I don't think that's gonna.
Yeah, it's not gonna last. Yeah.
So I mean, it doesn't matter. These things, it's silly.
Yeah, well, it kind of, I mean, at the same time as it maybe dates it, but it also kind of encapsulates, in a moment in time,
So it could be kind of nerve-wracking. I could see, it being nerve-wracking to, invoke the trappings of today. Yeah, partly because so much of it can be really fleeting and temporary. So that was my next, thing I was going to ask you about those challenges. And so, I want to get into what you're working on next, but I figure it would be cool to just mention, like, we're in your new studio in your home. Do you want to talk about like how that came about?
I mean, it's a long story with like having studios in Portland and kind of getting moved around quite a bit and needing to find something a little bit more solid. But I have a couple kids also, so it made sense to have a studio that was close to the house that I could just walk back here and work, or have them back here with me. They come in here and play sometimes when I'm making work. But yeah, it came about, and from that, just needing something more solid that I'm not going to get moved out of at any point. So yeah,
it's great to be in here.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Yeah, so we have all these source materials and drawings and palettes and everything you can think of, all these cans and jars. It's pretty amazing. I'm not a painter, so these things, when I see them, it's just super exciting.
Yeah, as a painter myself, I look at it and it feels like a mess, a little bit, but I get it. Yeah.
And then so I don't know. I think of something as large as this painting here as monumental. You think, oh, that's. I mean, to me, it seems that way. And this is part of the body of work that you're working on now.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about I have a show in October at Elizabeth Leach Gallery, and the title of the show, loose title, like the working title, is A Good Sport. So I've been thinking about sport a lot recently, and African Americans' history in it, but also the idea of being a good sport and kind of falling in line, which is what people in general have to do, but specifically Black people for a long time have had to fall in line. So I'm at the early stages of the works. But yeah, so I'm trying to work on concepts. And this is the first piece that I did, which, speaking of monumental, this is one of the larger paintings I've done. So it's a monumental size, I guess, of a piece, and the idea of making monuments to people. These larger ones are going to be, for the most part, like a solitary figure. And this one specifically is a guy named Gene Benson, who was a baseball player in the 40s, late 30s, 40s, played in the Negro League for the Philadelphia Stars. And he was a teammate of Jackie Robinson. So thinking about Jackie Robinson as a monumental figure, like I was thinking about the people that surrounded him that maybe didn't get the same spotlight that he got, but did incredible things also. So that's why he's figuring into this body of work. But I'm not sure where it's going to go from this. I have some ideas, but the ideas kind of come with the painting. Like I finished this one, and then this one might transition to some other idea. So we'll see. It's a process.
Nice. Yeah. I like we talked just a little bit about this, but I think of, especially with what's happening now as of the last, I don't know, 24, 48 hours. I think about what we leave behind as humans. What are the artifacts? What are the monuments that tell the human story? Yeah. And it's just interesting, like getting into this conversation, and it seems that your work is doing that. You're trying to tell the human story. Mm-hmm. You're so interested in story and human people and what they've left behind too.
Sure. Yeah, in portraiture, like that's the idea, is to kind of memorialize people, make monuments in the portraits, and maybe make monuments for people that in the time that they were around didn't receive the recognition or the accolades that they deserve. So in a sense, try to maybe course correct that, like make these like monuments, these past due monuments.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I also think like I've experienced loss, you've experienced loss, and I think that changes the way that you move forward. You want to there's a different way that you're registering life, and you want to share it.
Yeah, I mean, I lost my father last year around the same time that I had my second kid. So this is weird, like loss and gain that was happening. That like kind of threw me for a loop, but I quickly realized what I do is art. Like that's my thing. I paint. So to counteract that loss and to kind of perpetuate the gain, I started making these paintings that my kids could see, in time, and that featured people that kind of look like them, and not just my kids, like other like young Black kids, or anybody could see, and just like and hold on to and relate to. So yeah, the paintings I do, I try to make sure they're as relatable as possible. Again, I want them to tell a story, and I want them to be social and change lives in certain ways, but I also want them to just like have that joy and like have the happiness that when people see them, they're having a conversation, and maybe it's a hard conversation, but a conversation nonetheless.
Love it. I think that might be a good place to start taking some questions.
For sure. And Caitlin, you were saying to maybe read off the questions in the chat, or?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions here for you. I'll just read them out to make sure anyone who hasn't read them can hear them as well. I just love this so far, and how much of your work is remembering which monuments are kind of these markers of which stories we think are worth being told. And it's beautiful to hear how you kind of choose and amplify those stories, Jeremy. So we've got a question from Laura Mark here. Jeremy, you know Laura as Laura is a Creative Mornings volunteer who nominated you to speak for us. And just so folks have a little bit of context, Jeremy taught a painting class, and that's where Laura met him many, many years ago. So
like 13 years ago or something.
Yeah, I love it. I love the creative connections in this community. So Laura asked, photography seems very central to your painting process. Can you speak to your relationship between these mediums?
I mean, me personally, like I'm a photographer too, more like casual photography. Like I don't really show the work, but I like the same way you take a picture and capture a moment. I try to capture those same moments in a piece and try to tell a story in that way. I mean, deeper than that with the Shirley Cards, even the way color processes and the way you see color when you like look really closely at a photograph or really degraded JPEG in the paintings. Like if you were to see my paintings up close or in person, or just zoom in on them, you'd see like these little dots of color. They kind of play with the idea of pixelation and degradation of color in the image. So yeah, I think about photography a lot, and all my pieces I work from photos. So just in a really base level, this is pretty central to what I do.
Love that. That's really interesting, the play between mediums. We have a question from Rachel for both of you. Have you ever considered a collaborative project? I know I can speak for many when I say I'd be so interested to see what a visual and written dialogue would be just based on the openness of your conversation.
We've never done anything specifically. I mean, aside from, I had a little publication that I put out for my, what show was that? I did a show called An Education in 2017 or so, and Paul wrote a little bit in that, but nothing like back and forth, which I do think would be amazing to do. But Paul's done some collaborations with artists. What's the one that you just did with Shujon?
Oh yeah, I tend to collaborate with artists, and especially writers. But I just I did a publication in the right at the beginning of the pandemic. I did this little book of poems in conversation with sculpture work by Cynthia Lottie, and that was a really fun project. The Cooley Gallery published a book of that collaboration. So, you know, look it up. It went into a void, you know, because of the pandemic. And then Srijan Chowdhury and I did a booklet that was based on a studio visit conversation we had. Pretty exciting. But we have talked about doing a collaboration, but just in passing, and like, you know, wouldn't that be fun? But one way that I really would love to collaborate with you someday, and I think you know this, is getting your notebooks into publication and or have an exhibition. So if some people out there are you know, have the wherewithal to put on a really great big exhibition of reprints of Jeremy's notebooks, sketchbooks, man, that would be dynamite, and I would be so pleased to try to do a reproduction and, you know, in print. But yeah, anyway.
There's already love for a sketchbook tour and seeing all those, you know, early ideas and chunky painted pages and all of that here in the chat. So
they're killer.
Manifested into existence. You spoke it out.
Oh, yeah.
Happen. We've got a question from Leah. I'm really appreciating the creative friendship that you both have despite working in such different mediums. Do you have advice for cultivating and maintaining creative friendships?
Cultivating and maintaining. We talked about like genuine curiosity. I think it's important to have like a genuine curiosity in what the other is doing. We've known each other for almost 15 years now, and I've been amazed at what he's done every time he does something new, whether it's like a chapbook or art writing. He put out a book of art writing that was incredible. I'm always amazed when writers can, like a novelist, like writes a book, because I just can't. I can't even imagine like the time that goes into that. So just being amazed by your friends. I mean, I guess you can't make yourself be amazed, but I think really thinking about what your friends are doing, and understanding that, and I'm sure most of you know that it's really difficult to maintain a creative practice, and like through all the pitfalls and rejections that you get, and like it's difficult. So to have compassion for your friends that are engaging in creative activities, I think is really important. And just being really curious and talking to them as much as you can. Even if it's not about art, just talking to them about like what's going on in their life, I think just keeps you engaged.
Yeah, that's so well said, all of that. And I was going to say the same thing, just genuine curiosity. Like I said, we didn't used to talk very much about art. And I guess I'm realizing that was partly because before I did this little internship at the art museum, and before that, I had this long period of time where I wasn't really engaged in art at all. And I had been, but anyway, I realized just now, right now, that I think I didn't go and ask you about that stuff early on or know much about it because I was kind of nervous or something. Like I just felt like I don't know how to talk about it. So I just started asking about your work, and you know, you would show me what you're working on and show me the process.
We at one point we were studio mates. I think it might have been then that curiosity.
Totally.
Collaboration wise, I mean, we did the poetry reading thing.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
Yeah, so when me and Paul shared a studio for a year, so maybe a little over a year, and we started with a friend of ours, Allison, a poetry series, and Allison and Paul would put together the poetry. I would find like an artist to like exhibit that not necessarily fell in line with the poetry, just something else visual, like something visual to go with the words. And then we'd all kind of collaborate on music. So there was typically like a musician that played. So that was like a event kind of collaborative.
Pretty big one. I mean, that was really fun for us too.
We did it for a while too.
Yeah, I mean that thing. It was called The Switch, and that lasted for probably 10 years.
Yeah, about like I mean it kind of teetered towards the end, but
yeah,
for the first like 3 years, I mean it was pretty consistent. So yeah, that's some of the collaboration we did. Yeah, just thinking about that.
Glad you remember that.
And that's when our art, that kind of collaborative conversation things started happening. So yeah. But yeah, I have this here. This is Paul's book of art writing. So if you guys see this out anywhere, it's amazing. So it's all Paul can tell you about it if you want to.
Okay, here. This Sean Sullivan is the artist whose painting is shown on the cover. He's an incredible artist from, I think, around the Hudson area in New York. That's really cool that you pull that out.
I love it. Yeah, we've got a couple more questions, and cool. This has just been great to hear about. And I love that you totally forgot about this big epic collaboration that we did together after we asked about that. Which, you know, it is equally important to like enjoy stuff in the moment as to like reflect and appreciate everything that you've done together. So I'm glad we had a little moment of reflection and appreciation too.
Thank you. That's so true.
Let's see. We've got a question from Yvonne. I noticed your work incorporates creative layouts and typography. I know you mentioned you're inspired by a lot of publications. Do you dabble in other mediums like graphic design?
Yeah, I mean, my day job. I still have a day job that I work close to 40 hours a week. I try. I'm a graphic designer. I went to UNC Charlotte. That's where I graduated, and I got my degree in painting. But I also took enough classes to get like a BA in graphic design. And ever since I graduated, I've had some sort of design class or design job in some regards. Yeah, just around that. And yeah, magazines and publications have been a big part of my life. Like growing up, we always had Ebony and Jet around the house. Into the 90s, I would like hip hop magazines like The Source and Vibe. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. Like me and my brother would get those every month and just page through. And I was actually talking to my brother about those magazines and not necessarily looking at them for the design, but that kind of like seeping into my mind, like when I was in high school and middle school and things like that. And like coming back, and now that I've worked in publications, kind of makes sense. Like I didn't realize that I cared about it at the time, but it kind of became what I did for what I'm doing for the rest of my life. So yeah, I think about layout a lot and text to tell the story in my paintings. It comes and goes in pieces. Sometimes it has it, sometimes it doesn't. Kind of depends on the piece. Like if it calls for text or calls for some sort of graphic element, it gets it.
And sometimes it has only text, right?
Yeah, I've done a few that the portrait is like, or figures are completely left out. I was trying, like a couple years ago, I was trying to like, not necessarily move away from portraiture, but trying to tell a similar story without a figure somehow. But I'm not sure if I achieved it, but I tried. And that comes and goes. Like I've had ideas about, and they've been done before, but there's joke paintings that Richard Prince did on joke paintings. Like I thought about doing these joke paintings that were like just large paintings of jokes. I can go into that, but it'd probably take forever why I would do that. But yeah, just using text and pieces and layout has always interested me, like other artists that do it successfully. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, I'm curious about the joke paintings, but I feel like we need at least one example to know what you're picturing here, like what one joke painting would be.
What one joke painting would be? You know, the original one that I had, it's not slapstick. It's not like really funny. It's funny to me. I wanted to do a painting, the idea of two guys walking to a bar. That thing. I wanted to do a painting that was two black guys walk into a white space, and that's all it would say. But it's like, it's in my head. Like, I don't know visually what it would look like, but my idea is that it would be two guys, and the text for guys would be black, walk into a space, and the word space would be white. I don't know. That's where I'm at with it right now. But and at this scale too, like at a really large scale. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I had
progress. Some modern day, like, this is not a pipe vibes going on.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted to, kind of mess with that idea.
You got there.
So with the good sport, there's an idea. The show that I'm doing, there's an idea of getting like razzed and like people talking down, like the dozens, like your mama jokes. I was thinking about your mama jokes also. So I've been researching comics that might figure it into the good sports show. Again, there's a lot of things that I'm thinking about that are manifesting right now and kind of percolating. But there's a comic, Dick Gregory, who did a lot of social work. Like, he was a stand-up comedian, but he also did a lot of social work. So I've been thinking about some of the imagery in these books, maybe figuring into it. And these are all, every page is like a joke that he told. So these might end up being in the images somehow, but I love the pictures of them. So
that's so cool.
So yeah, I mean, these are all, like, I have all these like artifacts and things that I collect that come and go. I see them all the time in the studio, so they might make their way into the pieces in some way, maybe in a grand way, in a monumental way, but other times in like a more like indirect way.
That makes so much sense. A lot of what we used to talk about, and still do, and anyway, it's just humor, and we're just sit there laughing. Like, half the time I've known you, we're just sit there laughing.
Yeah.
So it's nice, the idea that you have some more jokes.
Yeah, and like the same way I say that I want the pieces to be light and inviting. I mean, what's more inviting than comedy? And like, but also some of the best comedians are funny, but it's like, I mean, Dave Chappelle, like, he's hilarious, and Pryor and Dick Gregory and Red Fox. Like, I've been thinking about a lot of these comedians that might make their way into this idea of a good sport. Trying to connect those two things somehow.
That's really fun too, that you kind of collect these things in your studio space, so they're kind of there with you all the time and can kind of infuse into the work when they're ready, or when that feels right. It kind of connects to. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, in me and Paul's conversation the other night, we talked about these physical items also being in the studio, and so I have this painting of Gene Benson that I'm doing, and I got the image offline, but there's like a connection that you lose when it's just like the internet that you're looking at for sources. So I like to have the physical things. Like, I started the painting, but then I went online and found 8x10 of Gene Benson that I bought with like his autograph on it, that just kind of like connects me more to the piece and more to the person that I'm painting. So the human element kind of comes through hopefully more in the piece versus this like digital thing that I'm looking at and painting and not as attached to. So yeah, the physical items and tactile things are really important to have around the studio.
They are. I think that plays in nicely to this question from Shamisa. When you choose to paint someone, is knowing their personal history or something about their life important to you, which I think you've been speaking to a little bit, or is there sometimes just something in the way they look in a photo that's enough to pull you in? And she also asks, do you find it interesting to paint someone you know nothing about at all?
Less so than nothing about. A lot of the reason I choose people is the way they look, the way they're looking at, like, engaging in the photo. But the research element of painting people is really important to me. If I hear like the slightest, like something interesting about a person that makes me want to like look them up and find out more about them, those are the people that usually end up in the paintings. So I kind of lost the question again. What was the question?
It was kind of about, knowing
selecting
their
of
personal history, something in the way that they like look that pulls you in, or where do you even start the rabbit hole of deciding like this is a trail of curiosity you want to follow and decide to paint this person?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Shirley card works. Like I knew that I was pulling from like the covers, mostly the subjects on the covers of these like old Black publications. So I just like looked online for a bunch of those, or bought a bunch of those off of eBay, and read the articles, maybe watched some of the movies or interviews that they'd done on YouTube or wherever I could find information about them. And if that curiosity about them like maintained, then I would usually use them in the piece. And a lot of my paintings are like an entryway for me to do research on a person to find out more. So if that initial curiosity is sparked, I start doing the painting. I start looking up information about them, watching movies. So just over the course of, or documentaries, over the course of working on a piece, I'm kind of educating myself at the same time about the person. And yeah, so that's usually where the interest. But again, there is an attraction level. Like if the image is attractive or the composition is really interesting, I sometimes just want to see what the challenge of making that into a painting equally as interesting, or adding something to the person by doing it in a painting or using it in that way.
There's something really beautiful there. Thank you for exploring that more with us. And I think, my more naive art days, I thought portraits were just like paint the person as they are, but there's so much more that goes into that, and your work is really a true reflection of that, and so many different aspects of the people being pulled through for us to see and discover. We're almost at 10 o'clock, so I just want to chime in with two more questions. One's from me. If there were a monument to each of your lives or your work, maybe what object or thing would that monument look like?
That's tough.
Mine's a pile of undone laundry, so
I feel like it shifts and changes. Like there's been some, like I guess, like like one monument for me. You ever think
That's a really great question. I never even considered for a second.
I mean, I'm personally like like I said, I lost my dad last year, and I lost my mom 20 years ago. So like on a selfish note, I'd love like a monument of like the two of them back together, like seeing my mom and my dad like memorialized in that way. I don't know if that's necessarily directly like my life, but in a selfish way, like I think that's really cool just to see that. Or even like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess I could do that. Like I could make a painting of my parents, but yeah, I think just thinking back on like big loss and being able to call that back up and have that be the thing that memorializes would be awesome.
That's beautiful. That's weird too, because I thought the first thing I thought of was my mom who passed away. But then I started thinking of like something funny, like something like some weird Rube Goldberg thing that keeps going and going and going. It makes you laugh watching it, but it could be a monument. Somehow it's a monument and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Something calamitous, because that's funny.
Calamitous, what a good word for the morning. Like, how would you like to be remembered? Calamitous.
Yeah, it's dark. I mean, that's the human condition though, so.
All right, well, we'll wrap on a lighter note. Unless you want
Sorry, I'm trying to think of something light now.
No, it's beautiful. It's really important. I think it's beautiful that, people that we want to remember and carry with us and carry forward are kind of what came to mind first. And that is so often why monuments are created. Christopher asked, what is your favorite joke?
Paul's gonna have a better answer.
If something springs to mind.
Yeah, favorite joke.
too. I'm just blinking.
I don't think I have a favorite joke per se. I don't think I could think of a favorite joke. Yeah. We're bombing on this question.
You would think I'd.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now as far as favorite joke.
It's hard on the spot. No worries.
Yeah. And I love, I mean, it's not a joke, but we were talking about Chappelle. One of my favorite skits from Chappelle is probably the Pop Copy skit. It's like the Kinko's skit that he did on Chappelle.
I don't remember.
That came to mind for some reason. The Pop Copy, you guys know the Pop Copy. It's like a spoof on Kinko's and how terrible Kinko's or FedEx Kinko's is. But yeah, I can't think of any like straight up jokes right now. Sorry.
All good. It's all good. I'll share one with you all, just so we've got a joke. What do you see when a duck walks away?
What?
It's butt quack. All right, yay. I won't say it's my favorite, but hey, at least we had a joke for
Pretty
you.
good. Butt quack.
That one's for your kids. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell my kids.
It's on their level. You're welcome, Christopher.
Wow.
Look for my joke book out later this year. No.
The Groucho Marx sanity clause is funny. That I like that one a lot. Look that up.
All right, I'll have to look it up. I don't know it.
Yeah.
The sanity clause.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap for the morning. Really appreciate you both being here, sharing space with us, just kind of like vibing about your artistic practices and the beautiful ideas you bring into the world. So thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, Laura, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Oh, and your current exhibition is still open in Lake Oswego, right, Jeremy?
It is, yeah. It's up until through April 23rd, but they are appointment only. You have to call ahead, or I think you can just show up and like knock on the door. It's a school, so they don't want a bunch of people in there all the times. But yeah, it's up until April 23rd, and then I have a show. I'm not sure. It's actually Yawa Menta's sisters put it together at Western Oregon University. I think that opens in April. I'm not sure exactly. It'll be on my social media whenever I find out more about it. And then my next solo show with Elizabeth Leach is in October of this year.
Wonderful. We'll help remind folks when those are happening and hope people can see some more of your work.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.